Hello, friends. Welcome back to Stylist Soul Tribe Conversations. I am joined today by Yara De La Torre. She is an astrologer, visionary, and optimist who helps individuals align with their authentic selves and live with clarity and confidence. She believes that answers we seek are already within us, and through astrology and energetic work, she guides others to unlock their true potential. After surviving a life-altering event in 2019 that left her paralyzed, Yara's journey of rediscovery led her to a profound spiritual awakening. It was during this time that she realized the transformation power of astrology, mindset work, and mindful living to navigate life's challenges and find deeper alignment with her true purpose. Yara now uses her expertise in astrology to help clients reconnect with their purpose, heal wounds, and align with the universe's rhythm. Through this process, she helps them step into a life of fearless authenticity and unlock their fullest potential, living in alignment with their true calling. Yara, thank you for so much for being on the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Lisa. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing all that about me. When you hear it all laid out like that, I'm like, wow.
I get like that too. When people read my bios, I get like that too.
It's so cool, I think that I meet people in person and it's kind of like a similar reaction. It's like, "Oh, you're a hairstylist." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Yeah." And they're like, "And you're in a wheelchair." And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're
And you're
like,
like, and believe it or not, that's the tip of the iceberg.
right. And
There's
I'm
so
like,
much
and I
more.
also read astrology and
Yeah.
like all these, wonderful things. I'm a mother and
Hmm.
I am just kind of a nerd when it comes to like business and marketing, which I love.
Yeah.
And there's just so many different avenues. And I think that that in itself is what sets me apart and what helps me be able to help so many different people from so many
Yeah.
different walks of life.
I'm so grateful to finally, I feel like we have been kind of like living for many years now. We've been in each other's world and in each other's ethers. We've known of each other, from like a very acquaintance level through different programs, through mutual friends. And just recently, actually, 1 month ago today, but 1 month ago, Yara and I were together in Miami, and I had met you at a Thrivers Live in the past. So, like, we've had some connection in person, but never very much. And honestly, even that happened so quickly. I would love to get together and connect even further in person, but we just really got more connected recently. And then we got back from the retreat, and I celebrated a birthday and I booked a birth chart reading with Yara. So I just feel very grateful. I have known for a long time, and I think you said something similar. Like, I remember Clubhouse days, we had like little points and moments of connection as well. You're always somebody that I've been very drawn to. It does seem like more recently our paths are connecting a little bit closer, and I'm very grateful for that. I feel like, as somebody who's just been a follower of yours for many years now, we see some things, we miss some things because that's how the algorithm works. I would love to just go a little bit into your story. I'm curious how much my perspective and perception is accurate. Again, being a follower of yours, I can tell that you've been putting in the work for a long time. From my perspective, it sounds like you have really, I don't know when it was, stepped into your truth. And I remember you kind of sharing like truth behind your situation and the accident that happened back in 2019. Like, that's my perspective from following you. Why don't you share a little bit more what that journey has been like? And I'm just going
Thank
to be a
you.
curious cat and ask you questions all the way, okay?
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I love that. I actually love to hear people's perspective from my
Totally.
story
Yeah.
because social media and algorithms are so
Yeah,
fun,
like you catch some
right?
things, you miss some things. I won't see your stuff for months, but I know you're active all the time. I'll think about
Yeah,
you randomly. I'll deep dive and, creep some of your stuff. But this internet relationship is very interesting.
I know, it really is. And I think a lot of us, or almost every single one of us, has had a lot happen in the past 5 years,
Yeah,
right? It's like 2020
totally.
pandemic happened, and like
None of us are the same. No.
absolutely, like the world is different.
Yeah.
And I feel like my own transformation began, I mean, many years back, but really like the latest one began actually in 2019. So my injury happened in April of 2019,
Mm.
a few months shy of my salon having its first anniversary. So I opened my first beauty salon in the summer of 2018. In the spring of
Wow.
2019, my injury occurred. And like in between all of that, I had become an educator for like a big, color brand. And
Mhm.
I was like climbing my way up into like social media and like
Mhm.
educating. I had just joined Thrivers, which is like where
Mhm.
I met y'all.
Yeah.
And it's just so wild because life just has a way of happening, right? Like all of
Yeah.
these moving pieces were happening at the same time. And simultaneously, I was in this relationship, which I thought was going to be the love of my life and the most adult relationship that I had had with somebody who seemed to have similar views when it came to success and working
Mm.
hard and all the things. And I really saw a family and a future for myself. And I was opening my salon and doing weddings and just
Yeah.
grabbing life by the horns. Everything
Mhm.
was good on the outside,
Mm.
but really on the inside, I think even to a certain degree, I didn't even fully realize how bad it really was. This relationship that I had been in for 2 years was actually so unhealthy and so
Mhm.
out of whack and so out of balance. And I was in my mid 20s during this time. I'm 33 now.
Yeah.
So it's like 2019, which is like 6 years
Yeah.
ago.
It is insane.
And this person was 10 years my senior, and I
Mhm.
didn't know it at the time, but I came to find out through much experience later on that this was somebody who had had a series of criminal
Yeah.
behavior and background, cheating in life, lying, and doing horrible things to get ahead.
Yeah. Really toxic, it sounds like.
Yeah, and they were really good at it.
Mm.
Like extremely good at it. Kind of like making con artistry like your life.
Mm.
Anywho, they were also very violent and very abusive in many different ways. And in April of 2019, an incident in which I was pushed off a second story
Mm.
and I landed on gravel and my back broke, which I can say now at peace because I've dealt
Yeah.
with this for so many years. I mean, not just the injury, but even that specific night. But for a long time, I kept that a secret. I
Yeah.
actually went on with my life and covered for this person
Mm.
because I love them so much and because I thought,
Can I interrupt super quickly? These are my
yeah,
curiosities that I want to know, and I have the opportunity to ask you right now.
yes.
Were
Um,
you subject to violence and abuse like as a child? Do you think that that led to, I'm obviously protecting whatever you need to, but like do you think that that led to the normalcy of that, or finding yourself in this tumultuous relationship, like did you, was it shocking that you ended up in that situation, or was that something that was kind of normalized for you?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question, Lisa, and I've never been asked that. Thank you so much for asking that.
Yeah.
I think that is so important. And I think that I always was the type of woman who was like, "Oh, that'll never be me."
Yeah.
Right? How could you like end up with somebody who treats you poorly? Like, why wouldn't you leave? I depend on myself. I started working when I was
Self-reliant. Yeah.
15 and whatnot. I grew up in a home with both parents who were married and loved each other. And there was like a series of unhealthy behaviors for
For
sure.
sure. Yeah.
Both of my parents, like in periods of their lives, struggle with like alcohol or substances.
Yeah.
For the most part, they kept it really together for me. I was
Yeah.
their last child, and I definitely like feel like I had the most opportunities. And like I grew up in like a middle class sort of home. I went to private schools. I
Yeah.
had the so you wouldn't think like, I didn't come from like a quote unquote broken home, despite, like the generational stuff, like I said, like
Totally.
alcohol and whatnot, which I
Totally.
think we've all like have battled to a certain degree. And like even my parents also battled their bit. I've actually been pondering upon this too recently with my therapist because
Yeah.
I love therapy. And I was like, where the fuck did this behavior come from? Right? Like,
Mm.
when did I stop? Like, when did I start believing that I wasn't worthy of love? Because that's what it really boiled down
Yeah.
to. Like, once I realized and I had the breakthrough of like the type of relationship that I was really in, it wasn't until 2 years after my injury. So I was in
Mm.
this relationship for a total of 4 years, so blinded to it. And it
Mm.
wasn't until one day I realized what codependency was. I didn't know what codependency was, and I always heard the word, and I said, "Well, that's definitely not me because
Yeah,
I'm
you're like, I am independent as can be. Yep.
literally, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not depending on nobody."
Hmm.
Um, until I came across an email that I swear it was sent to me directly from the divine, and it had all these like symptoms. It was like, do you feel like you're always doing everything for everyone else and nobody supports you? Do you feel like you never have time for yourself and you always put yourself last? And by the time that you get there, there's just no more time or energy or money.
I do feel that.
Like, yeah. And I was like, wow, what is this? Like, this is reading me like a freaking book.
Uh-huh.
And at the very bottom, it's like, if you said yes to more than like five or whatever, and I said yes to like every single one, you may be codependent. And I was like, what in the world is this? So I dug deeper into it and I ended up working with this codependent expert. And I
Mm.
finally got to the bottom and I was like, oh, when I met this person, I started like dismissing parts of myself and abandoning parts of myself in order to, I would sacrifice that in order to please them more. Right. And that was because I wanted love so desperately that I would do anything, even if it was abandoning myself or even my values or my morals or overseeing certain things, red flags,
Yeah.
because my yearning or my desire for love was bigger, because deep down inside, I was trying to get that love from somebody else that I needed to give myself. So I didn't love
Mm.
myself. So I was looking for, and I just went down this whole rabbit hole. And then when I brought it up to my then partner, I said very much the same. At the beginning of my relationship, I abandoned myself, but now I'm here and I want to fix it. The
Yeah.
response was like, oh, so you lied to me. And that was the very first moment that I was like, there's something wrong here, right? Because I'd
Mm.
become to this awareness of like, this is what's the problem is. This is why we can
Yeah.
never move forward. And then the response was very narcissistic, very like
Hmm.
one-sided. And I was like, hold up. So
Yeah.
that led me down that. Now, years later, we separated. I finally put an end to it in the summer of 2021. So
Oh,
it's been years now. And it wasn't until recently in therapy that I started to really try to say, okay, now I know it was the lack of love, but where did that come from? I had loving
yeah.
parents, I had
Mhm.
support, I had siblings, like,
According to the books, this shouldn't
right.
have happened. Yeah.
And then again, I came across something regarding codependency, and it said something along the lines of like children who felt emotionally responsible for an
Hmm.
adult or a caretaker in their life are likely to grow up to want to emotionally care for
Support
others. And
someone
I was
else.
like,
Hmm.
oh my God, there it is. I was always my mother's therapist, and I knew
Yeah.
entirely way too much about all the adult like ins and outs, finances,
Yeah.
like all the things. And
Mm.
again, I'm sure it wasn't intentional or come from like a bad place from my own mother, but it
Yeah.
did create this wound.
Yeah. So what took place for you to finally decide to like speak up about that? Because I have to assume, and again, just from my very far away perspective, I remember thinking like she must have really done some serious work and some serious healing to come out and change that story to the truth. Like what took place for that to happen?
Well, I think to sum it up, it was another set of divine events that went
Yeah.
down. Just like the events that led me to finally ending the relationship, which was just me beginning to choose myself. And when I say beginning to choose myself, I just decided to break a pattern, like a cycle that I had with this person where they would get mad at me for like they would do something awful. And
Hmm.
the normal cycle would be I would shut up about it and not say anything. Or if I did say something about it, they would get mad at me
Yeah.
for saying, like for even bringing up that their behavior wasn't
The truth.
acceptable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then they would get mad at me enough to where I would feel bad for even bringing it up. So then I would
Mm-hmm.
begin apologizing for it and then kissing their ass in order for them not to be mad at me anymore. And then the cycle would repeat. It was so crazy, like
Mm-hmm.
saying it out loud here. But
Yeah.
hopefully, hopefully somebody's listening to this and maybe being like, wait, maybe this will open up somebody's
Yeah.
eyes, because I know I didn't see it for a long time. And one day I decided to bring something up that bothered me that I knew was wrong. They
Mm-hmm.
reacted in the way that they did. And instead of me kissing their ass and
Mm-hmm.
like, feeling bad about it or even getting more upset, instead of
Yeah.
allowing them to trigger me into some sort of response, I just remained neutral. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to just go on about my day and like continue on the plans that we had, because I brought something up. It was like plans are canceled. I'm like, I'm just gonna go do this very
Yeah.
calmly. And it broke the cycle, right?
Mm.
So that just led down this whole like journey of discovery, and I finally put an end to it. When it came to me telling the truth, now that was the end of it was in the summer of 2021, and I did not tell a single soul about it. First of all, it was very scary for me because I had never lived alone with my injury. And
Yeah.
I also had a daughter who was
Yeah.
like, what, 8, 9 years old at
I
the
can't even imagine.
time. So, like, my fear was like, oh, if I fall out of my chair, or if, like, I don't know, anything. Like, there was
Yeah.
just all these fears around living alone and not having use of half of my body.
Mm.
And I didn't say anything to anybody. I even went to work at the salon with the girls, and nobody knew that I had split up with anybody. I
Wow.
think it wasn't until like Christmas time, maybe like the end of the year, that I finally started like telling the girls at the salon, like, hey, we're not together, blah, 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 blah. And everybody was shocked.
Mm.
And then some more time went on. And at the same time, I was going through some legal stuff with my daughter's passport. So I was speaking to my lawyer at the time.
Mm.
And then I had an old friend come back from like my past who I was helping, who was actually going through a breakup with a person who was very similar. Like, so
Mm.
I was holding space for them and like kind of allowing them to see for themselves what I had seen and what I had
Yeah.
found. At the same time, this is during the time where I was starting to learn about my own gifts and my own
Yeah.
skills when it came to astrology and tarot. So I was using this opportunity with somebody who was healing to help use my Reiki, like put into
Mm-hmm.
like use my skills. And this person, again, from way, way before they knew me, like when I was much younger, at some point, and then we hadn't spoken in many years. I think they were able to see through my bullshit, Lisa.
They had been there.
And maybe because they just knew me before
Okay.
all the things that happened to me.
Okay.
And as I was helping them, they said, hey, if you ever need to tell me something,
Mm.
like you can. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Nothing to tell here.
What do you mean? What are you talking about? I'm
Uh,
fine.
yeah.
And then a few days went by and it was just like building up inside of
Yeah,
me.
it stuck with you. Yeah.
And at the same time, I was talking to my lawyer, who is also an old friend that I've known for a long time. And almost simultaneously, within a few days of each other, my old friend, one day we called, we were on FaceTime. It was very unusual. It was a morning FaceTime, which I never really FaceTime in the morning. And I was in my car and I was like, I have something to tell you. And I said it out loud for the first time to somebody here in America. That codependency coach that I worked with was a woman in the UK, and that was the first person I told all those years back, but it felt safe
Wow.
enough because she lived in the UK. But
Yeah.
this person was here and they were real, and I was on the phone with them. And when I said this out loud, there was also like a noise, like a
Mm-hmm.
cry,
Mm.
like an emotion that came with it
Mm.
that was unlike any sound or expression I've ever had before.
Mm.
And I'll never forget it. I wish I would have recorded it because it was so intense. And I think it was just like years of suppression,
Yeah.
years of bottling up something in line to preserve somebody else's well-being who had hurt me so much,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was such a release. And my friend held beautiful space for me,
Mm.
and it felt so good. And it
Wow.
felt so scary. And then they said to me, I think you should talk to somebody about this. Like, this is not right. And I happened to be doing all that lawyer stuff already. So I had spoken to her and I hit her up, Lacey, and I said, can we call? I have a question. She knew the story. I used to tell everybody that I had gotten locked out of the house. And like, if you've
Hmm.
ever heard any of my podcasts in the past, I think I might have been in Brit's podcast or some of the
Hmm.
podcasts that I did prior to me coming
Hmm.
out. People would be like, okay, you're an amazing hairstylist, you're an educator, you're doing all these things, you're badass at it, you're in a wheelchair. And they were like, how did the injury happen? Or how did the accident happen? And I was like, oh, I got locked out of the house and I
Mm.
fell. That's it. Let's move
Did you
on.
and your partner at the time like conspire that up together, or did you just do that on your own?
When I first was on the floor, they came running down the stairs and I was like, I can't get up. I can't move. And they were like, quit lying. You're acting. Get up. Come on. Don't be
Mm.
stupid. And then they went ahead and like grabbed my arms and pulled me up several times, which created probably a lot further damage.
Mm. Mm.
And then after that, they were like, oh shit, like this is real. And it just like hovered over me. And they were like, what are you going to say? What are you going to tell them?
Oh, Yara.
I mean,
Yeah.
this wasn't the first form of abuse. I
Yeah.
got my like I got shit beat out of me at my one of my best friend's weddings just in December prior to that, just 4 or 5 months before that. And I had like a black eye that I like covered up and went to work with every single day.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't
Yeah. So yeah, you're like,
uncommon.
yeah, what am I gonna say?
I was
Hmm.
like, yeah, I'll just tell them that I got locked out of the house and that I fell and that so
Wow.
and I actually got airlifted to the
Hospital. Yeah.
hospital. And yeah, my partner didn't come with me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for going back to all that. First of all, let me say that. I guess I should have asked before we started how
You
comfortable you
did.
were with all
You're
that.
good.
Thank you so much. Those were just my own curiosities. And I think that just goes to show you truly never know people's stories. Like you never know what they have going on behind the scenes. Very powerful. And I'm very grateful that you have allowed me to hear all of that because I have to imagine that that's a lot to unpack. So, where does astrology and, like you said, your gifts and all of these things come into play? Was this something you were dabbling with prior to all of these life-changing events, from injury to finding yourself to breaking codependency patterns to growing to healing? Like, when did all of that come into play, and how is that still such a huge part of your world?
Okay. So, astrology, magic, the elements, connection to nature, has been something that I've always been fascinated by.
Yeah. Like
And
as young as you can remember?
always.
Yeah.
And like, it was also the only thing. My mother's a Leo.
Mm-hmm.
So, my mother was like hyper Christian, like I said, Christian schools, church,
Yeah.
all the 9 yards, and very much like she was trying to like create the just most pure environment for me to grow up in.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that was allowed that wasn't like devil, that was
Yeah.
evil, was astrology, because of course she's a Leo. And if you know a Leo,
And it was the 90s and the early 2000s, and the magazines had them, and like it
yeah,
was so fun. Yeah.
like I grew up Spanish, so if any Spanish listeners like Walter Mercado, who was like the astrologer in like
Okay.
Univision, which is like
Mm.
he was just super fabulous and flamboyant. He had like a little set, like we all loved astrology. So astrology was the
Mm.
one thing that was okay. I dabbled into it always. I always loved like that I was an Aquarius because like it made me weird and like I just always
You
have worn that
felt
like
connected to that. Yeah.
yeah. And like it was cool. So I've always dabbled into it, but like life happened, especially like in my teenage years when I really did get more into just connecting more, I think there was like a part of me that got like I would say maybe even a little freaked out. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
let me back it up. And then when I was about 21, after I had my daughter, that's when I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Such a good book.
Such a good book,
Hmm.
kind of crazy to be my first one. So
Hmm.
I had this entire like earth-shattering moment around religion in a
Yeah.
different way that I had before. Like I
Yeah.
had an earth-shattering moment around religion and like my connection to God
Mm.
and kind of like the guilt that I carried from having been raised the way that I was. And then I
Hmm.
had like a resentment towards religion. So I was mad about it. But then
Yep.
later on, after I read this book, it was like I had like a deeper understanding and
Hmm.
like respect for everyone's beliefs
Yeah.
and methods of connecting with source or with
Yeah.
divinity, you know, and like for my mother, it works by going to church and connecting with her.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
that's beautiful, you know,
Hmm.
so it really it restructured my way around thinking of like existence as a whole. Then later on, like life just happened. And then it was in 2021, Lisa, that just things started happening after my injury.
What do you mean when you say that?
Things started happening like I can't explain them. They were just signs from the universe
Like
and
incredibly strong. Yeah.
yeah, and pools. Like
Mm.
I was magnetized to certain things and I could not explain to you why. And I could have blamed it on like trends if I
Hmm.
really wanted to,
Yeah, it
but
definitely was trending.
trending. But it was
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, it was trending, but there was this certain amount of devotion and respect that went with it. Like when I
Mm.
first started learning tarot,
Yeah.
Clubhouse was dying out, but
Hmm.
I still had the app. And one day I just saw a notification with a little name and it had like the little crystal emoji. Somebody
Yeah.
went into a room and I just happened to click on it and I came across this wonderful woman, Jennifer's her name. She was just speaking and then I contacted her and I was like, I just want to work with you. I don't know what you do. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And she was just like, okay, yeah. And then I was like, Jennifer, like, I just got to ask her, like, hey, what's the difference between Oracle decks and tarot decks? And she should
Yeah.
just answer me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, how do you set up an altar? Like, what are these
Hmm.
crystals? She would just share with me. And
Yeah.
like, I didn't know this woman.
Yeah.
She didn't know me. We worked together. And at the time, I was like, okay. She told me, she's like, tarot decks are harder, more difficult. You have to learn it. Oracle decks are easier. I was like, okay, I'm going for the tarot
Yeah,
deck.
I'm diving in head
Yeah,
first.
no, I'm like, I'm definitely going for the harder. And then I went to order a deck on Etsy because that's just what felt good to me, Lisa. And I was
Hmm.
reading that you had to make a connection with it and you have to be respectful and get to know it and whatnot. Well, little did I know, I picked the one deck that came from fucking France. Like,
Yeah.
so it took 3 weeks to get to me. So there was this whole like period of time in which I had to be patient. And then I started that year. I was still with my partner when I was doing this. Like I
Hmm.
started to
This was
get
part
called
of the
into it
journey. Yeah.
and it was freaking
Hmm.
them out. Like it
Hmm.
was like, what is going on with you? Like, why are you
Hmm.
getting all this witchy shit? And I couldn't
Yeah.
explain it. And
Yeah.
it would like irk them, like
Yeah.
because they were like, what? You're not supposed to have a personality.
Yeah.
Or
Or
like,
heal yourself or think for
right,
yourself or be
exactly.
empowered in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
So that in itself started to create a bigger gap,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
then in 2021, I made some bold choices. I joined a mastermind that was $16,000 for the
Mm.
year. And
Hmm.
I did not know how I was going to do this. I also
Hmm.
didn't ask for permission, which is something that I always used to do with
Yeah.
my ex-partner. And I just started taking this bold action. And then I had this moment where I knew 3 people who passed away all within a week, and it sent me down this like journey. Like it was an inner child journey. I didn't realize it at first, but I
Mm.
was all alone for the first time. Like my daughter was with my mom, my partner, somebody that had passed away was their family, so they had traveled. And I hadn't been alone in years. And
Wow.
I was told by my intuition, I know this now, like go in the car and take a drive. And I was like, okay. And then I just drove and I happened to drive to this neighborhood that's really big down here where I live in Florida Keys. And I had a lot of history in that neighborhood. And it led me down all these parts of my own life.
Mm.
And then one of the other people who had passed away was their parents lived in that neighborhood, and I had rented from them at a period of my life. And I wanted to drive by their house. I felt weird about it. I was like, what am I going
Hmm.
to do? Like, their daughter passed away. What if they're
Yeah.
outside? What am I going to say? Like, sorry for your loss. But anyway, I
Hmm.
felt drawn to driving by there, and I almost missed the house. But then I drove again. And when I did, I saw that the number of their house was 555. And I was like,
Mm.
this is strange.
Yeah.
So I drove to the beach, and I have always loved numerology. I think it was the first method in which the universe communicated with me
Yeah.
through numbers. So I knew that they meant something, and I Googled it. And when I did, I read this huge article on sunscience.org that basically said, like, your entire life is about to change. It's going
Mm.
to be super turbulent. Things
Yeah.
are going to feel like they're falling apart and like everything's ending, but it is for your greatest good. And you need to hang on, and you need to trust, and you
Hmm.
need to believe.
Yeah.
I read it all, and with tears in my face, I said, I should call Kristen Sossman. But I didn't know Kristen.
Okay. I remember hearing this from her side. So keep going. This is really cool.
I didn't know Kristen. At the time, I was more acquainted with Hunty. And, because everybody was like starting their businesses, like
Yeah.
Hunty was starting his thing, which is amazing
Hmm.
now. But Kristen was just this like other wonderful lady who I'd met like at Thrivers Live.
Yeah.
I didn't know what she did, who she was, have never really even spoken to her, but
Yeah.
I had seen her in Clubhouse and whatnot.
And hopefully, if you guys listening to this podcast know that she's one of
Right.
the most special humans to grace the earth. But yes,
Yes.
so
I
no
call her an
surprise that
angel on
that's what
earth.
intuition said. Yeah.
And I messaged Hunty like that day or the day after, and I was like, the weirdest thing happened, but like I thought about messaging Kristen the other day, but like I don't even know her. And Hunty's
Hmm.
like, no, you should like do it
Yeah.
now. And I
Yeah.
was like, you think? You think it's not gonna be weird? He's like, go talk to Kristen.
Hmm.
So I talked to Kristen, and she tells me that she's like, this is like Tuesday. And I was like, hey, blah, 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 blah. I was thinking about you the other day. And she's like, when? And I was like,
She told me
weird.
this. Keep going.
She was
Yeah.
like, when were you thinking about me? And I was like, Sunday at 3 o'clock.
Uh-huh. And she's like,
And
bitch, shut the fuck up. I was thinking
yes,
about you too. Yes, I
she was
remember you
like, I
telling
was
me that now. I
literally
totally forgot.
sweeping my like kitchen, and she's like, I stopped, and something was like, I should talk to Yara.
Oh my God. And I guess we
I
should say this too for those that are listening. That's how Yara and I have finally gotten more connected as Kristen has been at my last three retreats, maybe four, last three retreats. And this most recent one was in Miami, and Yara lives in the Keys. And she was like, hey, would you mind if Yara came up and was like a little bit of a part of it? I was like, oh my God, I would love nothing more than that. So yeah, love to
yeah.
hear that. So then you started working
So
with
I
her. What do you
said,
even
I
call
don't know
that?
what, I
Started
was
this
like, I don't know
friendship?
what, yeah, I was like, I don't know what you do. I don't know what you offer, but like, I feel like I need it. And she was like, well, I do Reiki. And she was like, I was like, what is Reiki? Like, I've heard of
Hmm.
it, I've seen it, but I don't understand it. And she was like, it's energy healing. And she's like, basically, I do it from afar. I use a teddy bear as your and I was like,
Hmm.
okay. I can get down with this, like
Hmm.
let's try it out. And she was like, you just schedule a session and we go through it. I scheduled my first session with her, and she first taught me about what chakras were,
Yeah.
which was, it's literally now like a core concept of like
Of
who
your
I am.
being.
I have a
Yeah.
chakra tattoo across my arm. Um, I actually now like one of the gifts that I have as an astrologer and a healer is my ability to sense or feel emotions, blockages, or areas of interest, I would say, in
Yeah.
others. And I do it through, like,
Hmm.
I will
Hmm.
feel in messages through my own chakras. So, anyway, I started meeting with her. I think at the beginning, I probably was meeting with her maybe even like once a week.
Yeah.
And, energy healing is very real, even from afar.
Hmm.
And I could feel it as she
Yeah.
was working.
It's fucking powerful.
And then there were other times in which I would, now that we were comfortable, I would go into the session, would dig right into it. And sometimes I would go so deep into meditation that I would not even remember
Yeah.
what it was, but it was so powerful and it helped
Mm.
me so much. I think I worked with her at least on a monthly basis for at least 2 years. We're now on like we were both facilitators and we facilitate for each other now, which is
Yeah, touch
beautiful.
in with each other when needed.
Yeah, it was incredible. And she taught me so much. And she was one of my biggest mentors and just people who have walked the way with me.
I could say the same. She's definitely impacted my life in one of the biggest ways. There's a handful of those people, but she is up there for me as well.
It's been beautiful. And that just led me down a whole journey of self-discovery. I had a very successful online course in hair color and balayage and all these things. I still have my salon, which we're going on our sixth, seventh year,
Wow.
I believe. And I have an amazing team. I work behind a chair. And for the last like 2 years, I was in an exploratory mode. I was in masterminds, I was connecting with like-minded individuals. I decided to shut down my successful color course simply because it didn't align with
Mm,
my heart anymore. Was it
yeah.
good? Yes. Did people like it? Yes. Did it make me money? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Was it lighting me up? No, not anymore.
Mm,
So I went an actual entire year exploring and having
hmm
fun. And
hmm
I had an incredible mentor who gave me the permission that I didn't
mm,
need, but she was like,
yeah.
you're allowed to give the permission to yourself to just play, to just
Yeah.
see, like try things on and see if it
Taste.
feels
Yeah.
good, right? And like
hmm
particularly because she was able to help me, like remind me, like, are your bills covered? Yes.
hmm
Like, do you have sustainability? Yes. Like, does it all have to be right here, right now? Do you have to start making
hmm
money online right this second? And I'm like,
Yeah.
not technically.
But clearly, intuition is telling you that this is a season. If it's not right in front of you, the way that my vocabulary that I like to use towards that, this is just like my own creative process and my truth is white space, I call it, leads to big magic. That's just vocabulary that resonates with me. That's my journey that I went through. And so I'm the exact same way. Like you can force and force and force and say, no, I want my big idea. I want my life-changing thing. I want my empire, whatever. But if that's not crystal clear in front of you, you can try to force that all you want, but you just have to surrender and release and wait. That's my creative process.
Hell yeah. That's
Yeah.
so powerful. And something that I've said and I remind myself is like, you can do so much more on on a weekend of full alignment
hmm
than you could ever get done in an entire month of forcing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, when the flow comes over you, it's insane.
Yeah.
I remember when Kristen and I were touching base pre-Miami, we had a call and it was just her and I just to do some intention setting. And I just kind of overviewed her, kind of similar to what I just did with you for the vision casting workshop. Like, this is just kind of the vibe, the flow of what the event is going to be. And she had like a chill and a drop in and she like shared this idea. And I'm like, I just read this piece in the book and it like totally in this book that I was reading, it like totally aligned, which is now the book that she's obsessed with, that she's reading, The Artist Way. Anyway, so many bizarre synchronicities, but that's what I said to her. I was like, Kristen, we could have set a 3 hour Zoom call to try to force this idea, and we never would have came to that. But we just happened to like accidentally stumble upon this idea. And that again is so my process. Maybe that's not the case for everyone. I know some people are more analytical. I resonate strongly with everything that you're saying. And I, during that same time, went through my own kind of journey and remember those similar feelings of like, oh my God, I'm so drawn to this. And actually, right in this very moment of recording, I have had a period where I've been less, and I won't force it. Like, if coming down to my altar doesn't feel in alignment, like, I won't force that. And just recently, within the last couple of weeks, I've really been pulled down and I've kind of reset up my little office space and have my morning, practices and rituals again. I'm so intuitively led personally, and it sounds like you're very similar in that
I
way.
love that. I
hmm
saw your story with your little morning, like routine.
Finally back down in
Super
my morning
cute.
magic.
But
Yeah.
I think you're totally right. And I think it's worth giving it a shot. Like
Yeah.
to anybody listening, if you've been forcing everything, like why don't you just try being like, you know what? I'm gonna like let go, like let
hmm
let the gas, like the foot off the gas and just see what happens, even if it's
Coast.
just for a little bit. Like you
Yeah.
might be surprised of what comes through by trying out a different method than you have
hmm I like the
And
theme of surrender. I like the theme of tasting and experimenting. And I think I agree. Anybody who this is really resonating with, go ahead and claim that and grab that for yourself. Oh man, Yara, I could definitely keep going. We touched like one of the many talking points we had. I honestly want to say I think this might be one of my favorite podcast episodes that I've recorded to date yet. Like, really, thank you again for sharing your story. As you were speaking, like, the chills that were coming over my body. I am so grateful again to be getting to know you on this deeper level. I feel so strongly connected and grateful for you sharing that. And I'm very excited to continue to learn more about you, learn more from you, and explore together. We are going to collaborate again in another way. Yara is going to participate in the vision casting workshop, which I've put on for the last many years. It's a similar event, but we were talking before we hit record, and she was just giving some ideas of how she can touch on manifestation and a little bit of astrology and just some fun things for getting intentional for the year ahead. So I will have all of that information in the show notes. Yara, is there anything else that you really want to share or feel called to share before we wrap up?
um, I just want to say thank you for having me here
Mhm.
and for touching on all these cool subjects, and I guess just allowing your listeners to see all the different avenues of success, and
Yeah.
hopefully this helps somebody. And I always like to say at the end of every podcast or anything that I do that my inbox is always open.
Yep.
I'm a person with a lot of depth and a lot of room to hold for a lot of people. So if there's anything that you want to explore more of, or that touched you, or that you want to share or express, I never want anyone to feel alone. So my door's
Yeah.
always open.
I love that. I will have all of Yara's information in the show notes as well. Vision casting workshop is going to be January 2nd and 3rd, and you can definitely get some more of Yara as well as a lot of other incredible things during that event. So thank you, thank you, thank you, friend. We will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I will talk to you all next week. Bye.